And we're live. What's up, everybody? I'm Josh Hayes here with my partner Scott Moon, and we are live with Samuel Peralta here at Keystroke Medium. Welcome, Sam. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Josh. Good morning, Scott. I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh yeah, we're excited to have you on the show, and judging by the traffic on our Facebook event page, there are a crap ton of other people that are excited to have you on the show too. So we're excited about that.
Excellent turn. I'm very happy about that. One quick thing before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and try something a little bit different today. I have if you're anybody that's viewing has an interest in Twitter, we have Keystroke at Twitter at Keystroke Medium. I'll have that pulled up, so if you want to ask questions or something, I'll try to monitor that. I can't make any huge promises, but we'll do what we can.
Look at that, doing things on the fly. That's why I like this show.
You guys are risk takers.
Yeah,
I'm glad that we have these show meetings before, so I know what's going on.
Remember all the stuff we talked about in the show meeting? We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to go crazy.
And Scott mentioned nothing about the Twitter feed, so I'm glad that I'm in the loop on the show.
That's an original. Well, hey Sam, we kind of to get started. You want to kind of talk about yourself a little bit, so we can get some of our listeners familiar with you and kind of what you do.
Sure. So my name is Sam Peralta. My full name is SM451, but people call me Sam for short. And I've been a writer for a very long time. And I've been many things. And my day job is as in business development for a high technology firm. I also do startups. I'm on the board of directors for several startup firms right now, which is an exciting part of my world. But I've also been writing since I was very young, and my first love was poetry. I tried going through traditional publishing with poetry, and I've won awards, been successful in that. And then along the way, I turned to speculative fiction. One of my first loves was science fiction, and amazingly, I accidentally fell into putting together anthologies. So although I started out wanting to put together novels in this area, like a lot of other people, in the end I started putting together a set of anthologies called The Future Chronicles. And we just released our 15th volume, and our 16th volume is coming out at the end of this month. Every one of the volumes that I've released has gone on to be at least in the top 5 and in their genre, whether it was science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Some of them have gone on to be #1. Most of them have gone on to become the #1 science fiction anthology, and a few of them have even hit the top 100 overall on Amazon, the highest actually being #6, and it was #6 over all genres. Science fiction, mystery.
That's impressive. Is that unusual for an anthology to get that high in the overall category?
Very unusual. So I've got several anthologies that have hit the top 20, and one of them hit the top 6. It's just amazing.
That is impressive.
Do you attribute that to the authors doing press releases and sharing, or do you attribute that to readers wanting to read short stories and anthologies, or both?
It's a combination of everything, actually. I think we're in a stage that I call the silver age of science fiction. I feel that the confluence of the internet and mobile media has given us the ability to reach a larger audience. #1. #2, we're so full of activities now that the only time we get to read is in between things, at the dentist, waiting for the train, waiting to pick up your kids at school, in the elevator, and that kind of time isn't conducive to sitting down and immersing yourself in a novel, which is what you do when you're on a beach. But this is the time that's useful for short stories. You read a short story, you finish it in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, you're done. You've met the characters, you've grown, you've fallen in love with some of them, you've hated the villains, and you come to a resolution all within the space of the time that it takes for you to get to your dentist. So
Right.
Yeah.
all of these combinations of things made I believe an audience that was very large and receptive to short stories. Then the next thing was essentially finding ways to put anthologies together that had a certain level of quality. I think one thing that distinguishes the Future Chronicles from many other anthologies out there, and there are many books that essentially combine authors and put them in and put them out, and they're very commendable. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to put together authors that I wanted to read. I read their books first, or short stories, and decided, okay, I'd like to see more of them, and more people should read this. So people who wrote, for example, like Ray Bradbury is one of my all-time favorite authors. He was a master of the short story, right? The Martian Chronicles was, in fact, one of the inspirations for the Future Chronicles. You can see the DNA there, and that was the kind of thing that I wanted to do. So instead of soliciting stories from people and going through a big slush pile, I didn't have the time for that because I've got a regular job. I read authors, and then I invited them, and I said, I'm doing a themed anthology based on, say, robots, aliens, immortality, and then they would give me their stories. And because I already knew them, I already read their works, I knew their stories would likely be very good. So it's a combination of things: the very high quality of the anthologies because of the quality of the authors writing in it, the attention to detail, and essentially the love for the genre shown through the anthologies. So the authors themselves are readers. They loved what they saw, and so they expressed it. They got other people to read it, and then it just grew by word of mouth.
That's excellent.
Yeah, and I was going to say that even not knowing you or any of the authors, you can look through the genre, the categories on Amazon, and like you said, all the genre, all the categories have some are touched by the Future Chronicles or by some anthology that you've had a part of, and it's amazing to me to see 16 books out there by indie authors, the collections that have just done so well, and that's amazing because you never know what's going to make your career take off. And
no, you never do. Not really.
And it's just amazing to me to see how you have taken this and ran with it and built a brand that everybody can enjoy and everybody can take part in if they're good enough and if they put a lot of time and effort into it. What? Yeah, I am hearing a little bit of feedback.
Yeah. So the other thing that I'm excited about is the authors that I've written. There's only so much that one person can do, and right now the pace of the Chronicles is really increased. I thought that I'd slow it down, but we publish a book about once every 1.5 months, and earlier on it was longer, and then I set a grueling pace of one book a month. Now it's one every 1.5 months, and so there's no way that I could keep up with the demand. So although this is the Future Chronicles, this is a special edition that if you're new to the Future Chronicles, you should come and have a look at it. It collects 10 stories, full stories from some of the most popular chronicles, plus 5 totally new stories, and you can get that book free by registering for my newsletter. But the beauty of it is, although my pace is so high with the Chronicles, it's not enough. So some of the folks that I know, Chronicles alumni, have come up with their own anthologies. So it is really amazing. This is for example, Uncommon Anthologies that's put out by P.K. Tyler and her friends. And I appear in a story in this one. called The Price, and she's put that out, and she's basically spreading the word about the power of short stories.
Well, it seems like
here's another one, Clones, put out by Daniel Smith, another Future Chronicles alumnus. I've got a story in this called Fahrenheit 1451, and here's another one.
Love it.
Yeah, the 451 is the temperature at which books burn.
Books burn, yeah. Good old Ray Bradbury.
1451 centigrade, and I kid you not, it is the temperature at which human bodies burn.
Oh, see,
that's kind of freaky.
There's a lot of potential for horrible things to go wrong.
It's a cool story.
Yeah.
And Beyond the Stars is by Patrice Fitzgerald. It's a new series called the Beyond the Stars anthology series in Space Anthology. I've got a story in this particular issue as well called War Stories. But the beauty is that a bunch of people, and there are many more. I wish I could show them all, but all of these authors are seeing the power of short story, and not only that, the power to inspire authors to keep on going.
Right.
Because a lot of the 150 authors that are in the Chronicles now, a big percentage of them have found their first paying publication through the Chronicles. So
Really?
it really gives you a more than the sales on Amazon or the name recognition. When someone gets a story published and they celebrate that paycheck with their family, and they celebrate that their name is on a book next to authors like Hugh Howey or Robert J. Sawyer or Julie Cerneda or even Ken Liu. Ken Liu has contributed several stories to this, and Ken Liu, you know, he's a perennial Hugo Award winner for his short stories and things.
Right.
All of these great authors have basically bought into the idea that they're coming into the Chronicles, they're providing me with stories, and they're encouraging the new generation of authors. Shannon McGuire, herself a new generation, is in 3 Chronicles now, and she's going to be she's in 1 Chronicle now, and she's going to be appearing in 2 more Chronicles because I just got her stories. They're brand new, they're fantastic, and it gives me a thrill to be the first person to read them, essentially.
I'm sure it's very exciting for some newer authors to rub elbows with people they've known and other great authors, and so that's got to be exciting. It seems like from what you described in the beginning of our interview, you're talking about where people read in these shorter bits of time, and I'm guessing that this has been an underserved group of readers that have probably didn't know it, but are waiting around for these shorter works of fiction, and all of a sudden like, wow, and it seems like it's really taken off for you.
Yeah, it does seem like it. I mean, the other thing is that some of the short stories are standalones that come out of larger works.
Right.
For example, Susan McKay has a series of young adult science fiction stories about the singularity and how humanity evolves into ascending into a human cyborg state. And she's written several short stories that stand alone. You can read them. There's a beginning, a middle, and end, and they've appeared in the Chronicles, and yet they link into her larger catalog of novels. So there's a cross-fertilization of her novel readers into these short stories and back as well. Readers can sample stories, and then if they like an author, they'll sample 12 to 15 authors in a single chronicle volume, and if they like the author, they go on to follow them into their novels. You know, not all of the stories are for everyone. Right. Everyone has different styles, but if you find 1 or 2 authors among there that you suddenly build a relationship with in terms of what they write, then it's just then the Chronicles magic works again.
Well, that's just the thing too. Is you if you go and you scroll through the categories on Amazon and you're looking for a book, and maybe you see a book that you might like, but you don't really know the author, but you see the Future Chronicles and you say, hey, I know 1 or 2 authors in there that I'll read, and then you read that, but then maybe you hit that author that you didn't know, and you see that story in there, and you read it, and you like it, and you're like, oh, I really do like his work, and then you go buy his work. and that's what I think the magic of anthologies really comes in, is that people who are unknowns can build an audience uh, off of other authors, which I think this indie industry is really good at doing. Do you,
It
when you do
is.
the Future Chronicles, you have a whole bunch of invitees that you have already on your list? You said 150 authors have been in the anthologies. Um, do you have spots where people can submit to those anthologies that aren't invited, or how do you get new authors into the anthologies?
Definitely. So the most of the mainstream Future Chronicles are by invitation only. So they're people that I've read books of, and I think they'll do well. But first of all, in the mainstream chronicles, each chronicle has a certain percentage that I reserve for totally new authors. In other words, people who have not necessarily published in the chronicles before, who I'd like, who I think should be discovered, if you like. But in between the chronicles, I've done a few volumes where it's open invitation. For example, the Immortality Chronicles was open invitation. I just said, here's the theme. It's Immortality Chronicles. What do you think? Let's see it. So they send their stories in, and then a quality control then comes in with like a regular magazine. Essentially, they submit the stories. I review the stories, and if I think the stories are good enough to go forward, and usually they are good enough, because what they've done is it's a chance for them to be published in the Chronicles, which now has a brand recognition, and so they really do their best. And usually I find the stories are great. Now, it does happen that a few of the stories are not quite up to scratch. Then what I do is then I exercise my prerogative as an editor to basically to do some editing, to suggest some changes, and the author will usually rewrite to that. And then it comes through the editorial process. I have a guest editor for each title, and they also go through that, so the quality remains high. There have unfortunately been a couple of rejections where I thought that maybe the story was not suitable for the title, and that's just part of the way things are here. But the Immortality Chronicles was an open chronicle. Then I also have something called Chronicle Worlds. In Chronicle Worlds, it's if you like, a sub series within the Chronicle series. And in Chronicle Worlds, I choose an established world by an author. The first one that came out is in the world of Phaland, and that was a world that was imagined by USA best-selling author Anthea Sharp, and I presented people with the idea. Chronicle Worlds. This is now open. I've got 12 slots in. If you consent to write within the world under the series Bible created by Anthea Sharp, then you may submit, and again subject to the same reviews. And we've gotten a great response to that. Now we've got 4 or 5 chronicles on the offer. We've got Chronicle Worlds Paradisi, which is coming up. We've got Chronicle Worlds Halfway Home, which is based on the Halfway Home novel of Hugh Howey. Who, if you like, is a touchstone in the indie revolution.
Yeah.
We've got Chronicle Worlds Drifting Isle. Drifting Isle is a steampunk world, and coming up in August is actually Chronicle Worlds Legacy Fleet. Now, this is an interesting title. Legacy Fleet is a trilogy of novels by Nick Webb. I started in a writing group with him, so I knew him way back when. But now he broke through. His Legacy Fleet novels, which started with Constitution and then went on with Warrior and Victory, hit the Amazon bit charts big time. Yeah. So really big time. It's become a big bestseller. So he knew that I ran the Future Chronicles, and he said, well, what if we did this one time? And I said, well, that would be great.
He said, great, bring it.
And so that's coming up, but there's a kicker as well, because in August 18, the Future Chronicles is going to be entering the Kindle Worlds with Chronicle Worlds Legacy Fleet. So Chronicle Worlds Legacy Fleet is not only going to be a future Chronicles title is going to be a Kindle Worlds title as well.
Okay,
If
well,
it's successful, there'll be another and another.
well, let's go there a little bit for our listeners and for me. I'm not as familiar with the Kindle Worlds. I vaguely kind of know what we're talking about there. And so, what's Kindle Worlds, and how can readers plug into that and get some good books?
So Kindle Worlds is a program that's done by Amazon actually, and Kindle Worlds is usually based around established authors. So, for example, the worlds of Hugh Howey in the Wool series, and it's much the same concept. You start with a world that's already has been pre-created. There's a series Bible. There are set characters, and you write within that world, and essentially that. So you get the benefit of writing in a world that already has brand recognition.
If you read those books and really loved them, you might be, as a writer, I know lots of times like, man, I'd like to go into this world and just go run amok. So that's
right. So Kindle Worlds has a lot of authors in it right now. We're writing in worlds like and I can't recall which other worlds there are, but there's worlds for Kurt Vonnegut. There's worlds from I think True Blood or one of the vampire series is there. Blake Crouch has a world in there as well. And they're increasing the number of worlds more and more, and they exist in various genres. Wow. So for us to be included in to have a volume in Kindle Worlds is going to be quite a treat actually for the authors. They'll be quite a treat.
With the Kindle Worlds, now you're doing a Chronicles Legacy Fleet and a Kindle Worlds Legacy Fleet. Basically, you're involved obviously in the Chronicles with the selection and the editing and making sure world continuity with Nick is held. But what about how involved are you in the Kindle Worlds aspect of everything? Do you have any touch on that, or does Nick have any touch on that, or is that just that's all Amazon?
Not all. Basically, Amazon has a set of terms and conditions. It first of all will select what goes into Kindle Worlds, and it has a set of conditions. And basically, you've got to adhere to that. It's the same as publishing through the Amazon Kindle digital publishing program, the KDP program. The same as publishing through their Create Space program. They have a set of rules, and you essentially follow those rules. So that's all that's necessary here.
Is the Legacy Fleet Chronicles, is that going to be published through Kindle Worlds, or is that a separate thing that you guys are going to have out there?
It will be published through Kindle Worlds.
Okay.
So it's going to be treated a little bit differently from the other Chronicles, but I'm hoping that it gives a boost to both the Chronicle Worlds line that's outside Kindle Worlds, as well as the future Chronicles mainstream series.
Very cool. You've it's crazy because the amount of success that you've had through the anthologies and it's crazy because you've only been in this market or this area since 2014. But you've been in publishing for a very long time. Can you talk to us about how you got your start in doing this indie publishing deal?
So as I said, I've been writing for a very long time, but I've touched digital publishing way back when. If you remember Palm Pilots, those were the first. Yeah, those were the first.
On a Palm Pilot.
Sorry.
Oh, I said I wrote a book on a Palm Pilot. It's
that's very cool. But during the days of the Palm Pilots, I had a software company, and this software company, its name was Kivadis, and it actually wrote it programmed an ebook reader for the Palm Pilot. So I actually had the equivalent of the Kindle reader in the Palm Pilot. I had a Kindle app, if you like. And at one point in time, we had the largest library of free ebooks for the Palm Pilot in the world. What I did was I put together libraries from various independent libraries and put them under one roof and made it available to people.
Wow.
For free. But what we were selling was the actual application for the Palm Pilot to be able to read.
So that was like science
Actually,
fiction in action right there.
it's crazy. I was one of those who first published Seth Godin's Idea Virus ebook. We were nominated for an industry award, the Digital Literature Industry Award, and I didn't even bother to go because we were up against e-ink. You know e-ink.
Oh yeah.
E-ink,
Yeah.
E-ink is the technology that's behind the Paperwhite, and
Yeah.
we were up against Overdrive. Overdrive is the ebook publishing arm of Microsoft, and it was ourselves, Cuvadis, and we won. I thought, holy cow, we won! But it goes to show that the best technology doesn't always win out, because I bet everything on the Palm Pilot, right?
Right.
And I remember getting an email from BlackBerry at the time. You remember BlackBerry?
Oh yeah.
BlackBerry,
I had one.
BlackBerry wrote me and said, "Yeah, why don't you write an ebook reader application for the BlackBerry?" And I said to myself, "Well, why would I want to do that? Palm has like millions of users, and BlackBerry you only got 100,000, right?"
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I didn't.
It's
What I
weird.
should have done
It'd be kind of
was
like
write
working
one
on.
for the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And then when Apple came, I should have written for that, etc., etc., etc. So there you go. That was my first touch with digital publishing. I was on the ebook software side of things rather than the publishing side of things, and it was unfortunate because Palm Pilot did not succeed. But
Yeah.
you
I
know,
love the Palm
now
Pilot.
is a good time to be. Yeah, I love the
The
Palm.
best thing about the Palm Pilot was mine had a metal case, and if you ever
Right.
seen me handle technology, that's very important because it took a lot of abuse. Yeah. Yeah. I used to
the
sit and
Palm's
type
good.
on it, and people would walk by me, and with my little pen, I'd be writing a book, and people would walk by, "You playing a game?" I'm like, "No, I'm writing a book. Leave me alone."
What did you start out writing? Because you have several short stories that are not part of the future chronicles, that are just Sam Peralta stories. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing and how that kind of evolved?
Well, I started publishing to the to Amazon myself with poetry. I'd been published by small presses for my poetry previously. You know,
Right.
very limited runs and so on and so forth. And it's very nice, and a lot of poets continue to do that. And I thought, gosh, I had a blog, and there were 4 million downloads of my poetry, and I thought, gosh, 4 million downloads. If only, if I only got $1 for every one of those downloads, right?
Right.
Get a nickel for every one of those.
That's right. So yeah, even a nickel would be great.
Yeah.
But when I started publishing poetry, and I had 5 books of poetry out on Amazon, and my insight, I think I had a really good insight then. And my insight was that most poets published they published all their poetry. They'd have 50, 100 poems in one volume. Nobody's going to read that, really.
Right.
So what I did was I began themes in my poetry. And you'll notice that actually that idea of themes went on in the Future Chronicles.
Right.
So my first book of poetry was a series of vampire poems. It became Sonata Vampirica. It went on to become the #1 best-selling volume in American poetry at one time. So science fiction was not my first #1. It was poetry.
The title is awesome.
Sonata Vampirica.
Yeah, I love it.
It went on to become nominated for the best fantasy poetry book somewhere. But really, to be honest, to become #1 in American poetry on Amazon doesn't take a lot of sales, because not a lot of people buy poetry, right? It's a little bit embarrassing to tell you what the sales were, but then the next one was a book called Sonnets from the Labrador, which is a book of poems about Canada. The next one was called How More Beautiful You Are, which was a love poems, which has become eventually my bestseller in poetry, my all-time bestseller. So that's a hint. People love reading about love. So
there you go.
if you're going to write poetry and if you want to publish it and make money, write about love.
Write that down.
And then that's right. And then I realized that, and I thought, gosh, I'll do another one. So the next one was called Tango Desolado, which means desolate tango, and it was a series of love poems. And the final one was War and Ablution, which was a series of war poems, which was not my bestseller. People do not like buying books about them.
I don't like war poetry.
No.
It sounds,
So that was a theory. Themed volumes.
You write songs too, as well? Is that a natural outcropping of poetry?
Oh gosh, I didn't mention that. Where did you get that? Yes.
I've been on your webpage.
Yes,
Scott stalks people.
I'm stalking.
I have a catalog of what, maybe 100 songs or so, and they've been. I'm not a very good singer or myself, but I think I'm a good songwriter. So these have been performed by various independent musicians and bands. Basically, they're bands who want to step up from singing cover songs, and they want original songs,
right.
but they're not yet up to the point where they can write their own songs. So
right.
I provide them my songs, and one of my so one band performed in front of a crowd of 20,000 people, and I thought, holy cow, those are my songs that they're playing.
Yeah.
This is very cool.
That is. Really
I have a singer who I used on one of my songs for a demo, and she's gone on to win, like a year ago, the best new country artist in Canada. And I thought, wow, I knew her. She sang my songs. This is fabulous.
That's very cool.
So,
and songwriting is not an easy thing to do. Songwriting is like a whole other type of writing that, and it's, I think that songwriting takes a lot of courage, because having somebody sing your poetry or your verse or however you want to call it, any type of writing, you're exposing yourself to your reader, and that's why people have a hard time writing, I think, because you're really opening up. And writing a song, it takes a lot of courage, and I think that it's really difficult. And people who do it well are truly blessed.
You are so right. I wish that I could sling a guitar, and I wish my singing voice were better, but it's not, so I live vicariously through other bands and other singers.
That's
me, I just do it in the shower.
Yeah.
I tried. I went out to open mics and things. Horrible.
Yeah.
So you transitioned from poetry to short stories. I know you have Hereafter is one. I'm drawing a blank on the other one. I had it yesterday. What can you tell us about your short stories? Because they're all connected, right?
That's right. So it was natural for me. I decided to pursue another love, which was science fiction and speculative fiction. I said I loved reading those books. When I was younger, I kept on reading. I loved Margaret Atwood, and I loved Kazuo Ishiguro's book. I was a literary type, which is why I wrote poetry. But reading books like Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro told me that, gosh, you can write poetry even in novel-length works. But I couldn't write novel-length works. I had a full-time job. I had other responsibilities. And also my medium was poetry. So because poetry teaches you to be very compact in the way you see things, to use a lot of metaphor, to be very economical in your language, it became natural for me to move from poetry into short stories. So my short stories essentially were extended poems that were a little less compact in their exposition, but they were still packed with imagery, packed with symbolisms, and packed with metaphor. So they were the first story that I wrote, short story, was Trauma Room. And Trauma Room was Trauma Room was just 1,000 words. I said, I'm going to write a story that's 1,000 words, and I'm going to use it as a calling card to anthologies and other places. So if I show this story to editors, it would only take them a few minutes to read it, and they'd decide then and there if I could be given a chance in their anthologies. So a few people read Trauma Room, and I was given the chance. So Trauma Room led to the publication of Hereafter in a volume called Synchronic, edited by David Gatewood. I also showed it to John Joseph Adams, who was a Hugo Award-winning editor, and he then commissioned a story called Liberty, which was published in another of his anthologies called Help Me Fund My Robot Army. And just in case those stories did not get published, just in case I was rejected when I submitted those, I decided to start my own anthology, which was the Robot Chronicles. And the Robot Chronicles basically went on to spawn the rest of the future Chronicles. But I did want to touch on Hereafter for a bit, because that was really my first published short story, which appeared in Synchronic, and also appeared in the Time Travel Chronicles as a reprint. But it was selected actually as by Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy.
Oh, very cool!
The series. Wow. It was the series editor for this was indeed John Joseph Adams. He didn't select the story he edited. He selected a story edited by David Gatewood. And the title editor for this is Joe Hill, as well. Joe Hill, as you know, is
wow.
He's the writer of Heart Shape. He's related to some famous author, right?
Yeah.
But he's also a really good author in his own right. Heart-Shaped Box, The Fireman. Those are incredible stories. But Hereafter was spotlighted as one of the stories to look for in Best American Science Fiction, and that kind of, for me, validated, gosh, okay, I can write. I'm not just an anthologist. And it also validated the future Chronicles, because some people were saying, well, who is Sam to be able to say, gosh, I only publish stories that I like, from writers that I like. Well, if Hereafter can appear in a book like this, then I must know something about good science fiction and speculative.
You're not quite a hack.
That's right. I'm not quite a hack, or I can fool them all, right?
Yeah. What? So, with your first anthology, the Robot Chronicles, how did that get off the ground? I mean, did you just say, I'm going to do an anthology and tell a couple people and they told their friends, or how did you come in? They're all good stories. How did you?
That was basically it. I mean, there were other anthologies that were appearing at that time. I mean, I didn't, invent anthologies or anything like that. But
don't tell anybody that.
All I did was say, right? Yeah, don't tell anyone that. But I just decided to publish stories that I liked. And if other people didn't like them, so what, right?
Right.
But that was the way it was. I said I wanted to publish a short story somewhere. It took too much time to submit to literary magazine, to science fiction magazine, and so on. I'm a very impatient person, and I guess I could. I mean, I did submit to traditional publication. And essentially, I was in various writing groups, and I invited the people in the various writing groups to come and join me in this project. I mean, people like that were in that writing group that I was in included people like Peter Cowdron, Anne Christie, Patrice Fitzgerald, Deirdre Gould, Nina Croft, Sam Best, Anthony Meek, Susan K. Quinn, Vincent Trigili, Nick Webb. These are people whose names are now more familiar. They were not so familiar way back when, right?
This is a group I need to be in.
I know. It's like, I guess if you publish 15 anthologies, you just know everybody.
Well, after a while you do.
Yeah.
Most of the people there were not very well known, or they had novels, but they weren't really. And they had varying levels of success, put it that way. There were some people who were more well known than others, but all of them had written stories that I liked. So that was how it worked out.
So this might be a little bit of an aside, but it seems like you have experience with writing groups. What do you think about writing groups, or what's the best way to have a good writing group?
I like writing groups, but I personally myself I can't work in writing groups because I'm a lone wolf. When I write by myself because I know exactly what the way that I want to write things. Because I've written probably millions and millions of words of poetry. That has taught me to become very self-critical. It's taught me to become a very an exacting editor. So if I were in a writing group and I were open, I would be very critical of everything that I
And it's tough because you, as writers, Scott and I have found this to be true in a lot of our reading lately. As writers, you read something and you say, I would do this completely differently. I would take it and flip it around, and you don't read it for enjoyment. You don't read and say, "Oh, that's good. I like that." You read it and say, "No, I wouldn't write it like that. I would write it."
Why can't they? Yeah, we were talking about something, and I can't remember which one of us said to the other. It was like, "Are you reading as a writer again, or are you just reading the book? Just enjoy it."
That's right.
What you
right.
And
so
the
best writer groups, I think, are where people don't really. Where people encourage each other. In other words, they tell stories of they tell stories of how I did this or how I did that. How did I tackle such and such a problem? But I don't think what's super helpful, especially if you've already got a bit of a track record in writing, is telling people exactly how they'd write a passage or things like that. Because although it's helpful if you're just beginning in all this, as you get more and more confident with your own style, you know how you would write things, right? You just need maybe a little bit of help with, okay, I'm writing a detective thriller, I'm writing a police procedural. Anybody in this writer group was a former police officer who can help me here with this police procedural, and that is tremendously helpful, right? That would be tremendously helpful.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of people in writers groups. I'm a part of a couple. They want to be an editor and not help the writer build the story. And so, like I submitted a short story to a competition of one of our Facebook groups, and it's a 1,000-word flash fiction short story. It's not themed or anything. You just take a picture and you base your story off that picture. And
is this the recent one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So I took that story and I wrote it, and we had 2 weeks to do it. So I wrote a first draft, and then I wrote another idea, and I came back and messed it around and kind of revised and edited. And then after I did that, I'm friends with a lot of other writers. I didn't send them a big group email. I sent them individual messages and say, "Hey, read this. See what you like. Tell me what you think." And so I get that back from these writers, and to their credit, they never once said, "Don't do it this way, do it that way." But they said, "We know that a boulder is large, so you probably don't have to have the large." Right, that kind of stuff.
That's
where it's looking at the story and making it better, but not saying, "Don't write that, write this." And you can take bits and pieces of whatever they have given you and make a better story, and that, I think, is what would make a fantastic writer group. Not trying to change your work, but trying to make it better.
That's right. That's a great group to be in.
So with your editing and your chronicles, when you get a story and you say that some of them stand on their own without having to have any work done to them, or maybe they do, by the time they get to you, when you do your edits, do you do them to keep the theme, or do you do them for grammatical errors? Because you have other editors that come in and work on the project.
I do. It's quite a process, actually. I have to say that 75% of the authors who submit to the chronicles after an invitation, they've already had their story edited. They've spent their own money because the chronicle submission is so important to them. They've actually had beta readers read their story. They've had editors go through their story. So the stories I receive are edited, and if they're not, and that's very obvious, and I send it back, and I said, I always tell people, don't send me something that you think will be edited by my editor. If I read it and I don't like it, you've got to consider the chronicles as you would any traditional publication.
Yeah,
you would not want to. That's right. Give me your best work. Don't give me a half-baked work.
Right.
And some people really take that to heart. So by the time it gets to me, what I do is I review it, and if I like it, it's dangerous for me to fiddle with it because I can. I have my own voice, and I don't want to interfere with your voice. After all, I want to present this author as that person is to the reader, so I don't want to mess with the voice. What I do is I look for inconsistencies in the story. I look for ways that story links to the theme of the volume, and occasionally I do developmental editing as well if I like the author, but I feel like they haven't quite gotten it. And I'll also do some line editing. I don't do a lot of developmental editing because it just takes too much of my time. I've done it for a couple of people, and there was one case where someone submitted a 14,000 word story, and I said, "Gosh, I can't give." This was very well, but I've got a limit of 8,000 to 10,000 for the chronicles, and I said I can't submit that to my title editor. And the author said that the story had already been edited by her editor, and it couldn't be brought down any further. And so I said, "Oh, I'm going to prove you wrong." So I did. I edited 4,000 words off of that piece and got it to 10,000. And the author said, "Oh my God, you did it!" And she said the story is still great. So she submitted that story back to her own editor, saying, "This is how it's done." She submitted it with all my line edits to show how it could be done. And it's exactly things like what you're telling me. Why are you saying the large, impressive boulder when you can just say boulder, right? Things like that, and
I read
very
a book
simple things.
I read a book by Sol Stein on editing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. And he has a rule in there that 1 + 1 = 1/2. And it's basically like you use a bunch of modifiers in a row, just pick one, and use the strongest modifier. And that alone can cut a lot of words out of a story.
Exactly.
I would say that
if great big rosy red boulder, you can cut all those except for the best one.
I would say that if you're in the process of writing, or even if you've written several novels in the past, writing a short story, whether it's 1,000 words or 10,000 words, and I just got into writing short stories here recently, but it really forces you to look at your piece, look at your writing, and cut everything that you can. Right. But for instance, this piece that I just wrote is 1,000 words. Well, my first draft was 1,500, and I knew I couldn't do 1,001. It has to be under 1,000. So you've got to, like, I was going and taking like ands out and trying to figure out like how to get the little itty bitty words that would make a big difference out.
It's hard to cut 33% of your story.
It's crazy. But I did it, and I think I got my total word count now is like 996. But it really helps you get into that, get rid of the fluff. Let's get to the meat of the story.
If you get a chance to read Trauma Room, which was my calling card short story, you'd be surprised at it. It's 1,000 words, and it's a mystery, thriller, love story with a cast of like 4 or 5 characters in it, and it sets up an entire future world in 1,000 words. There's an assassination. There's the aftermath of an assassination. There's a mystery, and the mystery is solved right at the last word. So it's a very compact piece of storytelling that I use.
Check that out.
It's instructive. to and basically why I point that one out is because that was my calling card story. I honed that story so well so that if I showed it to editors, they would say, okay, let's give this guy a chance, right?
Oh
I
yeah.
really put my best foot forward on that one.
And I think that that's what you need to do with everything you do. And I have made the mistake, just like a lot of other indie authors, where I started a series and I wrote the first book and I put it out there, and it wasn't as good as it should have been. It wasn't as good as it needed to be, and you go back and you fix it. And that's that. I know a lot of authors say don't publish your first book, publish your second book, but even then, make sure that you've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. And
it's a tough call, because if you got to start, and you're always going to look back on stuff and want to wish you could change and things like that. But you're right. And Josh and I have both been writing for a long time. I'm sure Sam's been writing for most of your life. So
that's right. So everything you put out there is, adds to the perception of who you are and what you do. So as many poems and short stories of mine are out there, there are like 10 times more that no one is ever going to see.
Right.
They're just not good enough.
Yeah.
They're just not good enough. For a submission, one submission that I have to some of the anthologies that I showed you by other people earlier, I've written maybe 3 stories that I've discarded and said this is not going to work.
Yeah.
For my clones short story, I had 4 separate short stories that I tried and completed before I came up with the one that finally made it into the volume. I may work on the old ones, because that's the thing now. I have a lot of rough drafts that I can hone until I think they're good enough. But it's all about writing practice, isn't it?
So it's kind of different, novel craft and short story craft, when you're talking about how you actually write. I'm curious, since you're mainly short story driven, when you sit down with a concept or an idea, do you plot the short story out from beginning to end to have an end point to get there, or do you just kind of discovery write, figure out where you're going?
I was waiting for you to get to the question.
Yeah, I got it in.
It's half and half. I first start out with a concept. I've got an idea of what's going to happen, but I only have a vague idea of what's going to happen at the end. Okay. Because I like a writer, I know that I'm going towards a final culminatory scene, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen in that scene. For example, I don't know if you've read Humanity, but Humanity is about a truck driver, and who comes upon an accident scene, and in the scene is a woman and her young daughter. But it turns out that the young daughter is not what she first appears to be. And the question is, suddenly faced with the knowledge of what the daughter is, will the truck driver save her or not? And from the accident scene, and I wrote 2 endings to this, and I looked at it, one ending where he saves her and one ending when he does not, and both of them had ramifications, and I just went with the one that felt the best. But when I started writing out the story, I had no idea what that truck driver was going to do, but the truck driver's character grew in the telling, right?
People have very strong opinions on this topic, and I know whether it's because we have 2 issues here, the planning versus discovery writing, but then I've read about and talked to several people who they say, I have to know the ending before I start, and I've tried to do that. I've never been able to make it work. I mean, knowing where I'm going I like, in a general sense, but actually knowing the ending to me seems hard, but some people really have a lot of success that way, so I guess it's different for everybody.
I think it's half and half. You need to know, you have to have an idea of where you're going at the end, but so that all of the plot points can drive towards that ending, but that ending in the writer's mind should be flexible enough so that you're surprised by it, because I think that if you're not surprised by it, then it looks a little contrived, like all the story has been leading to them finally falling in love at the end. But you've got to have that piece of suspense where you don't know. Will they fall in love and walk into the sunset, or will he kill her? Right? Or will she, or will she strangle him? You don't know, right? and it's if you can keep that excitement up for yourself, definitely you can keep it up for the reader.
Absolutely.
I think one of the big advancements in storytelling in general, whether it's writing or movies or whatever nowadays, is I think audiences are more tolerant that maybe the hero doesn't make it. And, there's several shows on there because, I grew up where every single movie you went to, you're like, well, I know they're going to survive this car chase.
Happily ever
after. How many buildings they blow up, they're going to make it. Well, nowadays, with some of the series out there, especially the series serial fiction on HBO and some of those things, is, your favorite character may not make it. And so there's a lot more tension as to will they fall in love or will they die or, or whatever. So I think it gives a lot of opportunities to writers.
Yes. Film is another interest that I've had. Over the years, I've helped produce or produce various films. It's another way for me to encourage young artists and show them and show them that people have an interest in their short films and they could go on to bigger careers. This was one of the films that I first produced, Closure. I was an executive producer on that. It's a short film by Enrico Poli, who's now directing a new film for me that I'm also doing called The Future, and you should see that soon. I also helped produce The Nostalgist, which is based on a short story by Daniel H. Wilson of Robopocalypse fame. And so The Nostalgist is out now. It's a short film again. I also like anime, so I helped produce the English version of The Time of Eve. Usually they're already out, so they need help with English versions. I started out doing small Kickstarters, but in the end, as people began to get familiar with me, they'd contact me directly and say, we see your interest, can you help? And one of the interesting things is I helped also produce something called The Fencer, which later on went on to be shortlisted for an Academy Award and was a Golden Globe nominee for Best Foreign Film, which I thought, wow, that's kind of cool.
So
my head's spinning with all the stuff we've covered so far in this. So I'm like,
it's amazing how many different things you have your hands into.
And some people say, okay, what in the world are you doing? Are you some kind of a cyborg or something? But as I always tell people, creative people, whether they be film producers, film directors, actors, actresses, artists, because I collect art as well, authors, songwriters, I tell them all, let your light shine and pay it forward. When you can, pay it forward. When you're in a position where you can encourage other artists, other writers, other actors, singers, pay it forward. Encourage them. And this is the way that you can give back to the community. This is the way that you encourage the next generation and bring forth a new Silver Age in whatever medium you're in.
That's awesome.
That's a really good message and really important. And I think anybody who is an artist or a creative person has probably felt some of that pressure to stop being a kid and grow up and get a job and blah, 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 blah. And so you need to have but nowadays things are changing because you can chase Pokemon now when you're any age.
Oh, I actually saw some people chasing Pokemon.
Oh, I saw some. Yeah, pretty much every day. I'm starting to figure out where some of the geographical landmarks are that I didn't think about in our town. There's one intersection.
It's a secret trick to get you to exercise, right?
Yeah, because I remember, like the Keeper of the Plains, you expect there to be something there because it's in our town. That's a distinct monument type thing. But there's this one intersection, and I kept driving through it and seeing these people. I realized, well, duh, that's basically the start of our city's grid. It's 0 north, 0 east and west. It's central and main. And there's always people there, any time of day or night. And I'm like, well, it's because somebody that doesn't know our hometown said, well, this is a good place to put a bunch of Pokemon. So anyway, but it's good to be able to play games. It's good to have fun.
Well, we're coming up on the hour of the show, so I'd like to start wrapping it up a little bit. With the Future Chronicles, the 16th volume you say is coming out in August. Is that right?
It's coming out end of July.
End of
That's
July.
going to be the. That's right. That's going to be called the Shapeshifter Chronicles, and we've got stories in there by some really really good authors. Ken Liu is going to be in that, and a whole slew of other people you've got to read.
And do you and is there, obviously you have plans for future volumes. Where can aspiring writers that have not gotten the invite, where can they go to see about getting into the Chronicles and see what they need to do to submit to you?
Well, like I said, there's a lot of other anthologies that are out there now, spawned by a lot of the alumni of the Future Chronicles. But the Future Chronicles does have a Facebook group that you can join, and there in that Facebook group, there's a thread called the One Book thread. And what you do is you post your best book or short story there, post a link to it, and I will eventually get to it, because I don't invite anyone, and I don't confirm an invitation without reading at least one story from them. So post a link to your book there, or your story, and I will eventually get to it. There's a lot of books in there, so there's a lot to go through, and that's probably the best way. And also, if you hang out in that group, and if you help promote other authors, then you get on the radar, obviously.
Right.
But
Paying it forward.
people who are there, yeah, and people who are there and who will also have the first crack at any open anthologies. For example, people say, "Gosh, Chronicle World's Halfway Home, based on Hugh Howey's book. Why did I never hear of that?" Well, you weren't on the Facebook group. Essentially, when I announced it and I said, "This is open season on Halfway Home," Hugh Howey's told me, "Go ahead and do it." I said, "Okay." I opened it, and gosh, within a couple of hours, all the slots were taken. If you weren't there, you weren't there, right? Now, some slots may fall open if the authors say, "Oh gosh, I can't make it," or they say they decided their deadlines didn't work, or if I reviewed their story and I thought, well, this doesn't quite work.
They developed a horrible Pokemon Go addiction and had to stop writing or something.
That's right. The slot opens, but if you're not in the Facebook group, then you're not on the radar. The more you help other authors, the more you're on the radar. That sort of thing. That's how it works.
And is it strictly done through the Facebook group, or do you guys have a website or anything else to?
Well, I've half started a website, and I teased the website, but I'm a control freak, so I want full control of the website, so I'm building that myself. And in other words, it's not there yet.
Right.
So I've got all the domains, and they all link back to Amazon, essentially.
I gotcha.
I got one quick question. Make sure we squeeze this in before we go. I'm not quite sure how close we are. If you could pick 3 things that you've written that you would like people to read that best represent you, can you give us 3 to put out there for people to check out? Because you've written a lot of different stuff. I know you mentioned the Trauma Room. That's probably one that I'm definitely going to read.
Yeah, that's a super duper short read, right? My most I'd say one that has become a really big favorite, probably big favorite of many more people, is a story called Faster, and it's an anthology that's not one of my own. It's in an anthology called The Powers That Be. That's put out by a group of friends who also wrote stories in the wool world, and they put together an anthology. I got an invitation, and I wrote. And this Faster is a superhero story about a girl who can move incrementally, not a huge lot, but only incrementally faster than you can. And the question is, does that give her enough of a superpower? And it's only available in that anthology, in The Powers That Be. And Hereafter is that love story that was pegged for Best American Science Fiction. But I also love War Stories and Fahrenheit 1451. War Stories appears in the Clones anthology by Daniel Smith, and Fahrenheit 1451 appears in Clones, and War Stories appears in Dark Beyond the Stars. And those are the closest stories to what I would like to write if I were writing a novel. Those have that has the feel of the kind of work that I would like to put out there.
Excellent.
Very cool.
Very good.
Well, Sam, I'm absolutely thrilled that you came on the show to talk with us today. I had a blast talking with you. It's going to be, the audio is going to be hopefully done this afternoon, and I will send you the links to that. But I want to say that to any author that's going to submit to or wants to be in an anthology, we've already said it, but I'll say it again, definitely do your best work. It seems like Sam's really busy, and he wants to do the best for anyone to get out there and get your business and get your writing out there, but don't take advantage of that. You need to definitely put your best face forward and best foot forward and put your good work out there. But Scott, anything else?
No, it's great. I mean, this has been a great interview. I'm glad we got to have you on the show, and look forward to more interaction with you. I have to go back and listen to this one again and digest some of the things we covered.
Thank you very much for the invitation. For all those who put out questions in Facebook and Twitter that didn't get answered here, I'll get back to you and answer them.
I'm pretty sure that we hit most of them without actually asking them. I think a lot of the answers to a lot of the questions that were out there we got without actually asking them. But yeah, if you want another question answered, you can leave it in the comments on the YouTube video or put it in the group in the event or wherever you found it, and we'll get back to you on those. But thanks everybody for watching. Sam, thank you for being on the show, and we'll see you guys later.
This has been great, and good luck to you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Okay.